Chapter 561, Rotation. The acolytes from the sect arrived only moments later, and Dominic called the clerics over. "If you would like to come with me to the manor, I will find you a room. It might not be fancy, but I can guarantee that it's warm and dry. We could use the relief for the priests who are doing the weddings." He explained. "Of course, Your Grace. It is an honor to perform wedding rituals. What customs are you abiding by? The Signia custom?" Dominic shrugged. "Mostly, we're letting the men wait for their wives to come down the aisle, instead of coming second. We have a lot of weddings to get through, and it is both faster and highly popular among the barons. There might be a few who will want to go by the actual tradition or the wavemates tradition, but they will inform you beforehand." The cleric laughed. "You can't think that someone would actually roar at his wife in this day and age." Dave and the city guards both began to laugh. "I did. I must say, it went over rather well, considering that we were in the Signia Royal Palace," Dominic explained. The cleric shook his head and tried not to laugh. "I can't believe that you did it. I mean, given your lineage, it's not anything that wouldn't have been considered tradition a generation ago. But the last generation of wavemates nobles almost all eschewed the tradition in favor of a more egalitarian ceremony." Dominic smiled. "I agree. We need more equal ceremonies. I shall endeavor to teach my future daughters to roar at their husbands." Dave nodded in agreement. Trollish women often simply took their chosen husband and threw him over her shoulder. It was a good tradition. The cleric's apprentice smiled at Dominic. "I think that we will do just fine here. The old ways are quite flexible, and the dragon gods approve of their followers expressing their devotion in public." "Well, we can talk later. Amy, if you'd please return us to the manor. The gentlemen of the guard will remain here for a while until the mages arrive to take over." Amy opened the portal directly to the entrance to the main hall that they were using as a chapel. Dave waved at the bride, who was waiting to come in, then giggled as she held out her arm for her to escort her down the aisle. The crowd cheered, then laughed as they realized that the dainty noblewoman was being escorted down the aisle by a gigantic mountain troll. It was a bit ridiculous to watch, as his hand was nearly as large as her torso, but Dave was gentle with the bride, and even took a moment to fix her hairpin before the ceremony started. Then he sat down cross-legged behind Alexis to watch the show. The wedding ceremony went quickly, and Dominic came forward to swap positions with Alexis. "I've received the first batch of refugees, and set patrols to watch them. I told them that I would be back in the morning with a list of baronies and the available specialties. They understand that most of the new residents will have the option of farming, or starving. So, we shouldn't have too many problems. They do have some skilled workers, and from what I can tell, there are a bunch of trained magic users who are just out of practice after hiding it, so they weren't recruited to serve the Dago's lords." He whispered, "Good job. I will keep updating the list as everyone leaves so that we know how many can be shipped out at a time. It's better not to overwhelm any of the new barons, and we don't want anyone arriving before their new lord has time to at least clean and repair his house." "Oh, the mages are helping with that too. The radio report said most had it figured out, but the sect sent out people. How late are we planning to run ceremonies?" "I brought a bunch more clerics from the Dragon Church. That will make many of the couples happy. Why don't you give our poor pastor a break? He's been slowing down," Alexis suggested. Dominic waved the aging priest of the Dragon Church forward and moved to stand beside the other cleric, so everyone knew what was going on. "Pastor, you can rest. We've got a new arrival and his acolytes to take over the blessings while you get some food and sleep. If nobody objects, we will continue until we run out of folks to marry," Dominic announced. The barons laughed. Someone would have to inform the ones who had given up on being on the list tonight, but other than that, it shouldn't be a problem for them to spend their first night here at the manor. Well, not a major problem. There were other considerations than logistics. On second thought, they should stop for a few hours so that every couple got the chance to spend their first night together properly. Assuming that they wanted to. If they didn't mind, then Dominic was happy to let the priests work. Betty brought the new arrivals snacks and coffee, which the old man sniffed gently, then sighed in profound appreciation. "You have no idea how good it is to smell fresh brewed coffee after so long on the road." You are a true blessing to humanity. Betty laughed. I will pass the message along to the elf and the trolls who grow and roast the coffee beans. We're all very appreciative of their efforts. Tea is good, but it's not coffee. The priest nodded as he washed down a sandwich, and the next groom in line moved to the front, while Dominic and the acolytes stepped back to let the ceremony begin. The young men immediately retreated behind the curtain that hid the stone wall from the venue and took out pillows. If we nap now, we'll be awake and ready when he gets tired. We've done this before, usually for the New Year blessings, which run for 3 days straight. The young man whispered. I will leave you to it. Dominic whispered back, then took his seat to walk the ceremonies. It was going to be a long night. Chapter 562. All-nighter again. A long night was an understatement, Dominic realized as Alexis returned from an afternoon nap to take over from him. With the extra clerics here, the new couples were happy to hold their weddings in the middle of the night, and the main floor of the manor had turned into a bridal-themed party while everyone waited their turn, or celebrated their weddings. The full traditions of a noble wedding night might not have been adhered to, but Dominic did notice that the spare rooms were completely occupied, and it was not uncommon for the newlyweds to vanish into them for a short while whenever one came open. There was a constant stream of laundry coming and going from the basement, fresh sheets for a dozen rooms twice an hour, by Dominic's estimation. But that was a small price to pay to keep the newlyweds happy, and Dominic knew that many of them intended to be awake until first light when the transport could safely send them to their new homes. There were also many who had retreated to their various dorms to get some actual sleep before heading out again. It might not be ideal, but sleep was important, and they had a long day coming for them. Just before midnight, Dominic returned to the hall to swap positions with Alexis, and found that everything was just as he left it, only the faces were different, and a bit more intoxicated. Not enough that he was concerned about anyone causing a scene, but lively enough that those getting married in the middle of the night wouldn't feel cheated out of the support of their peers. The morning came far too early, Dominic decided. The staff brought out breakfast at first light, so everyone could be ready to go when the vehicles were prepared. But he had been up half the night, and now it was time to update the register of occupied manors and head back to the refugee camp and inform them of the tabulated numbers. While that was not the ideal morning, when he would rather be getting some much-needed sleep, nobody wanted to spend another day waiting to find out their fate either. So, he found a group of trolls to accompany him and mounted his new warhorse for the ride immediately after breakfast. Julio was up early, and he had given Dominic the list hours ago. That would cover everyone who arrived before dark last night, and then later today they could update the list to send more people to the others who were leaving this morning. They were done with the Barrens now, thanks to the extremely rushed schedule. That meant at least one house in every territory should be occupied by the end of the day, and they could guide the new arrivals to where they wanted them. It was free housing that the refugees didn't need to build, and it came with household goods that they hadn't managed to bring with them when they fled their homes. There wasn't much more they could ask for, especially when the houses were likely to have at least some food growing in the fields and gardens. Perhaps not what they were hoping would have grown, but as Dave would say, enough for soup. The refugees were getting to their feet as they saw Dominic and Dave approaching. Some had started to take down their camps, but most didn't trust that they would actually be going anywhere today, no matter what Dominic had told them. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I do hope that you've eaten well. If not, let me know, and I will have a sack of oatmeal delivered to make porridge. I have with me a list of barons who settled into their new homes last night. They are willing to start accepting new residents today. I also have an outline of other locations, but the commoner housing situation hasn't been verified, so I can't give you numbers until their barons arrive today. However, some of the estates are more than 60 kilometers away. Even if you leave on foot today, it will take at least a day for some of you to reach your destination. So, I will make sheets to show what is available. If you do not read, you can ask your neighbors or the mages that are on duty. They are all educated. First off, we have a need for farmers. They are the highest priority for the barons, followed by smiths and millers. Some estates have special requests, so if you have experience working a vineyard, please come forward now. The refugees looked around for someone who might fit the bill. Only one family came forward. My lord, we worked the vineyard west of the old capital. The father insisted. Perfect. This estate is where you're going. You'll see the old vineyards on the hill. I am informed that they are mostly intact. It's 30 kilometers, so you have a fair walk, unless the bus is going to make trips to deliver everyone. Dominic explained. They hadn't thought about that. The bus driver was intending to try to get a job with the Merchants Guild. He had a bus and 2 sons with warrior-type Magitech trade skill cores. They would make good guards, and he could strip the bus for cargo or keep the seats for passenger service. Actually, come speak to me. I think that we might be willing to make an arrangement to keep you in the area with your bus. There are a lot of people moving around the region, and not all of them will have carts and wagons. Dominic added, convincing a bus driver to run a regular route through the territory shouldn't be too hard once they started to improve the roads. And he could use the data from today's personnel transfers to tell him what routes were the most important and easiest to repair. 2 birds with 1 stone. There was still far too much to do, and he really was ready for a nap. Chapter 563. Self-regulating. The driver of the bus gestured toward his vehicle. I don't see an issue ferrying everyone. It's better than making them walk for days when they could rest here and prepare to move into their new homes. I will work with you to get all my people delivered to the baronies once you have the numbers. You can just show us who has homes for how many, and we will work it out. We had to work out arrangements for everyone to get along as we traveled. We wouldn't have made it this far as an intact group if we hadn't. So, I'm sure that we can manage to work together for a few more days to make sure that everyone ends up in a proper home. That's a relief. Doing all this myself is a bit of a headache. All right, I will relay and record the official numbers while I'm here, then pass the duty to one of my assistants from the Duskblade sect or the Wistover Town Guard. Both are capable of sorting out the issues easily enough. Now, here are the barons who arrived yesterday and the initial reports of how many homes are ready for residents to move in. There are more houses in the baronies, but many are destroyed or too damaged by abandonment to move into immediately. These ones should have minimal leaking from the roof and solid walls. Unless informed otherwise, the household goods within the homes are for the use of the residents. If you find something that does not qualify as household goods, let your lord know, as it might be a war relic. Dominic explained. What they were likely to find as war relics would more likely require burial than a finder's fee. But it was better not to say it that directly. Dominic put numbers on the map copy that the mages brought him, and the refugee group's leaders immediately got to work. All right, we have one easy win. There is only 1 vineyard on today's list, though it looks like there are more to settle later. Learning new skills is going to be mandatory for nearly everyone, unless you've got a trade that never goes out of style. Now, you can grab your family and head for the bus. Give me a head count before you enter, so we don't end up overloaded. I will make multiple trips all day today. No need to pack it like sardines. The representative from each family, most commonly the wives, gathered around the topographical map and began to ask questions. The houses, what are they like? Can we expect thatch? Tin roofs on wooden walls? Log cabins with slate tops? One of them asked. Mostly are going to find fieldstone walls and slate or tin roofs. That's the standard on this side of the country. You will find some others, and a lot of the hunters' cabins are made of logs. Of course, there are some much rougher ones as well. Not everyone was living a solid stone house life, even before the invasion. But most of what has survived in good enough condition to move in is stone. Dominic explained. And gardens? As I recall, under the old laws, we were all allowed to keep a half-acre garden that wasn't tithed. Dominic nodded. Nearly every farmhouse has a garden, yes. Most also have edible plants still growing in them on a volunteer basis, so you'll have something left to harvest, even if it's not much. You did miss peak harvest season after all. But the potatoes might not be rotted. The corn will still have some dried seeds standing, good for grinding into meal or flour. You get the idea. The ladies nodded and began taking out notepads to make their own drawings of the area, using some obscure farming traditions that Dominic knew nothing about. But after a few minutes, they had all decided on what region they wanted. Not all of them were going to be going out today, and that didn't seem to be the biggest factor for any of them. What they did consider was how many others were going to the area, including others of their close relatives. Then it was all up to terrain and some hidden factor that likely had to do with crop preferences. Some things grew better in different soil. Dominic knew that much. What he didn't know was how they could guess what they would find based on a topographical map. Well, it looks like you've chosen to spread out well, and every baron is going to be getting at least a few of you. That's wonderful news for everyone. We won't have anyone sitting lonely with a new wife and a title, but no residence. Dominic joked. The refugees laughed. That would be a bit embarrassing, getting a territory that absolutely nobody wanted to move into, even if it meant that you would have your choice of the very best spots once you arrived. That was one of the factors that many had included. All right, we've got enough for the first bus load. If I call your name, tell me how many are in your household and head for the bus. Once we're loaded, we will head out. I'm starting with the closest baronies, so we can get as many moved as possible. It looks like the barons are doing the same thing. Most of the names are close to the city, with only a few further out so far. The bus driver announced. It only took him a dozen calls before the bus was loaded with small children sitting on parents' laps to save space. That would get him through 1 or 2 baronies near town, and he'd be back in an hour or 2 at most. Just enough time for everyone to start getting excited about their new choice of homes. Dominic motioned for the mage and guard sergeant on duty to come over. I'm going to take Dave and head back to the house to see how things are going. We'll be sending out most of the other barons this morning, and that will free up more locations for the refugees to go. But it's generated a lot of paperwork, and I keep running away from it. He explained. Then you'd best get back before someone comes looking for you. Chapter 564. Pop's Wisdom. Dominic didn't head straight back to the manor. Instead, he swung by Pop's shop and the carriage works that were located next door. The guards had returned the new transport, but he wanted to talk to them about what their plans were for more. Pops hadn't been to the house much since the chaos with the debutante event had started, and Dominic really couldn't blame him for eating at home instead of coming over for Beth's food. He dismounted in front of the shop, next to the transport that the guards had borrowed the evening before, and stepped inside only to almost bowl over the clerk. The young woman was so short she barely reached his shoulder, with an innocent and startled expression and jet black hair. But it wasn't her hair that caught everyone's attention. Her breasts were literally larger than her head, and the top buttons of her uniform had been removed. He thought that Pops was joking about Meade having done that. Hey, what's Pops up to this morning? I need to talk to him for a moment. Your Grace. He's quite busy in the forge this morning. Can I help get you something? I know where everything is. The girl stammered.
So do I.
I was his apprentice once. How about this? I've got a hammer. I'll go give him a hand while we talk. Before she could answer, Dominic walked into the forge, where Pops and Meade were polishing the interior surfaces of a new batch of cast iron skillets. Hey, old man. Need a hand? Pops shook his head. We've got this. But if you've got a minute, make me some cart bright out of the scrap clay there in the corner. I need it for the new transports. Dominic nodded and headed for the corner. The guards are big fans of those transports. They're not the sort of thing that the merchants want, but I hear that there are plans to make them the standard for public transit. I would like to include the baronies in the routes as well. Folks might not have a huge amount of time off, but if they can just catch a ride to the city, or even the next barony over any day they want, it will be a huge help for the craftsmen. Being able to buy things without losing an entire day or more is the key to keeping goods flowing without sending merchant caravans to every barony every week. Pops smiled. I think that will work out well for us. Plenty of the workers in the factories have mentioned that they'd like to be able to visit family on the farms as well. It's a long walk even to Baron Keith's place. Losing their whole day off to go see family on the farm leaves them exhausted from walking. Exactly. If we have enough of them wandering around, we can get people where they need to be without walking all day. It will also give us a much more reliable watch patrol. Not that I want to put guardsmen in them, just give all the transports a radio and they can call in anything that they see. Bad road sections, trouble, even bandits if we happen to get some. That's not a bad idea. The prototype we made has a good radio in it, so we can test it properly. But it's also got the high-traction rubber tires on it, and they've been a huge hit with the riders. Why is that? Dominic asked. They're not solid. They're filled with glycol. So, They flex when you hit rocks and bumps, makes the ride even softer. Plus, they get amazing traction. That's why I need the cart bright. The spindles aren't strong enough if we make them out of brass or mild steel. Those wheels give them a real punishment when driving at speed. That one is all-wheel drive as well. Even though the roads are basically non-existent, they'll be able to go anywhere with good speed. You could start using them for military transports, but they're a bit small. I suppose that they're good for a rifle team. 6 men in one of those would be good enough for deployment, but they'd still be better on mechanical cavalry. If you're sending out infantry, you need more than that little truck will carry. Well, you can't win them all. They're good for literally everything else. They're also much quieter going down the road than the hard rubber or steel-banded wheels. That's a great change. I think that they're going to be a huge hit in other cities as well, especially ones with stone roads. Pops nodded as he began to heat the freshly polished pan in preparation for seasoning. That's the idea. They're planning to convert one of the factories we've been using for housing. The carriage maker found 2 more journeymen, and they've hired 6 apprentices from the young nobleman. It won't be pure profit for the duchy, but it looks like you're about to have one of your first major families growing here. The Merchants Guild is going to be all over these once they get production ramped up. Which reminds me, you need to go talk to the infrastructure team before you go home today. They're working on new housing all through the city, both high-density and family compounds for the untitled nobles who want to bring more family here. There are also going to be more shops, but I don't think you're going to lose as many of your new arrivals as you had thought, and that's not even considering the refugees. They've got more requests that haven't made it to Julio's daily reports yet. Dominic sighed. I was afraid that the answer was more paperwork, but I should have expected it. If they're doing housing, they're not going to be able to do roads for me anytime soon. But if we can clear a warehouse for the lads to make these lovely transports, that's not going to be an issue. Transports that can get through the muddy field roads at a decent speed are more than any other duke can claim to have. Plus, we have the tractors and merchant trucks to move trailers if a large shipment needs to get somewhere. Pops nodded as he dunked the hot pan into cooking oil. That's the spirit. Just give them a bit of time, and we'll have a dozen of them running around the duchy plus the 4 for the city. Then they'll be sending them out to everyone else as fast as we can make them. But the real money is in the airships. The dwarves have been killing it on that second version, and it won't be long before they'll have it up for sale. You've become a very wealthy man, apprentice. Chapter 565. Tell everyone. As Dominic left Pop's forge, a middle-aged man in a leather coat flagged him down. I hear that you're sending the freshly arrived refugees directly to the barons. What are the odds that the rest of us can get in on that? The man asked bluntly. Very good. I'll make an announcement for everyone who wants to move out of the city to go talk to the group in charge of the dispatch. They can find you places among the barons who have farms open or who need your skills. That should help cut down on some of the crowding within the city. I only started with them because they have a bus that will help get them all moved. Dominic explained. Whatever works. There is an empty caravan waiting on an airship as well. I'm sure that we can hire them to get a few hundred of us at a time out to the farms. It's easy work, all reward, no risk. Now I just need to make a proper announcement. If I put a note up on the board, it will take a while for everyone to read it, so I'll spend some time spreading the word. Dominic sighed. You only need to go to 3 places. The town guard barracks, the tavern, and the tea shop. Once the regulars at all 3 know, everyone will know within a few hours, especially those of us who are in group housing. That should do it. Once the groups start to find out, they'll get curious and spread the word fast enough for me. If almost everyone knows by the end of the day, their exodus should alert everyone else by tomorrow. The man threw back his head and laughed. That it would. When everyone starts packing up and leaving, those who didn't get the message are going to start having questions. That will spread the word faster than anything else, and it will push everyone who is procrastinating, hoping that they'll find some cushy work somewhere, into making a final decision if they're going to remain in the city or move out to the villages to start over. It will be good for them. Too many are stuck in nostalgia, or can't quite get past the loss of their old status and wealth. But we're all here now, and it will be up to us to set up the next generation of our families, so we need to choose well. Either we have the talent or we don't. There is no relying on past generations' contributions and glory in Westover. Dominic nodded. That's a great way to look at it. There are a lot of people starting from nothing, so it's all up to your own capabilities to get ahead. Now, a lot will be proud to settle into a good farm and raise a family. But those who want to start a family legacy, like the handful of great families commonly running many of the other cities, are going to have to earn it on their own. You don't object to great families? Not at all. If they have the talent, they have the talent. The Khalil family has a compound over by the bakery, and they also own the mercantile store, plus a few other shops. They might not be a great family like some other cities have, but they're certainly an impressive one, with so many talented businessmen and businesswomen in their household. That made the man laugh. Indeed. One of my brothers got hired by them as a security guard. The old man wanted someone to hang around and keep folk from harassing the new girls at the bakery. They're too young for marriage, but not all the lads got the message. The curse of having good-looking daughters. Dominic agreed. You could go the other way and end up with one that's impossible to marry off. But I don't think that's any more stressful than having one that you have to chase suitors away from. Me, I've just got boys, and they're already grown. While boys are a handful, at least they're extra hands to work the fields, assuming that they're not gone and married off by now. Dominic joked. They're living in Coster. They're happy there, but I thought it was better to take a chance and get off that tiny plot we had to try my luck here in Westover. Who knows, maybe they'll show some filial piety and send me a bit of money now and then. The man laughed, then turned to leave. Thank you for the information, Your Grace. I will be sure to tell everyone I come across today. The man was true to his word, and he even stopped at the tavern and stuck his head in to shout the news to the patrons. That was one less place that Dominic needed to stop, and he made sure that any groups of people he came across also knew so that they could inform others who might be planning to leave town. He also stopped at the bakery, as it was one of the busiest shops in town, and letting the staff know would catch nearly everyone over the course of the next day or two. With a bit of luck, they would get enough people moved that they would actually be able to start sorting out the housing situation. However, there were still so many noblemen and debutantes in the region that there was no telling what it would take to get everyone into suitable housing, or how many were even planning to leave for their family homes. Most of them had been trained since birth to do something that would benefit the family, and that meant they could also be classed as skilled workers or tradesmen. Of the more technical sorts, naturally. Dominic made a circuit of the shopping area, then the industrial area, so he could inform the warehouses holding the majority of the overflow population. Then, he decided to take a short trip out of town for one last stop at the academy. This change was going to put a lot of strain on people, and Dominic wanted to make sure that they could keep it from turning violent when the number of houses began to dwindle, and people didn't get their first choice of place to stay. Chapter 566, Sidetracked by Current Events. The kids at the academy were out for recess, playing in the yard to burn off some energy before returning to their studies for the rest of the day when Dominic arrived at the Mage Tower's back porch. It was a lively scene, with all the younger sect members trying to keep the kids under some semblance of control while they played. Elder Manif, just the man I was looking for. I needed to speak with you about a few things.
Dominic began.
Likewise. There is news that you need to hear that can't be put into the official daily reports. That sounds much more dire than my request for the mages to keep an eye on the groups who are moving out to the baronies. Let's find somewhere suitable to sit, and you can give me all the details. The elder led him into the upper levels of the tower, where he had his office, and then spelled the room with multiple layers of defensive barriers. Well, this must be important. Lay it on me. I will start with the worst news first, and then work to the best. The Signia Army's airships besieged Falster this morning, and the clone of Prince Kaizan was destroyed. By best reckoning, the king and his children are now the only direct living relatives of the royal lineage. However, while that sounds like a good thing, what we found was far from good. The rebel nobles still had at least one last necromancer working with them, and they poisoned the water in Albrols. By latest estimate, there are 500,000 undead in and around the city right now, and the royal palace is under siege. Within the next few hours, the envoys and royals gathered here are going to have a new topic. Dagos is going to fall. There is a portal restriction over the city of Albrols that none of US can break, and the palace doesn't have the ability to hold out in a siege at this point. which will leave the nation without a leader. And that brings us to the next bit of awful news. It appears that the Necromancer King took the news personally, and he has reassigned many of his humanitarian aid teams to eliminate all rebel nobles who are working with the renegade necromancers from his nation. The Shersdonian army is slaughtering the few remaining Dagos nobles, while half the country is underwater, and it's causing absolute chaos. Nobody knows what is going on, who is supposed to be in charge, or what is going to happen afterward. The only spot that appears to be stable at the moment is the city of Southford, and that is only because they already had an incident with the nobles there, and the Shersdonian army took the city. Dominic nodded. I was aware of that much. Amy and I verified it in person. They have stabilized the city, so there might be hope that the Necromancer King's forces are going to do the same once they have eliminated the other nobles. Elder Manif nodded. That is a possibility. But it leaves the question of who is going to rule Dagos if everyone who has any clue how to do it is dead. The reality is that we're looking at 8 or more nations, all turning the former Dagos territories into a bloodbath as they fight for control of the region. Everyone wants their share, and the fall of Albrols will turn half the continent into a war zone. That's the next major issue. You're the Duke of Westover, and Kynwyn is currently a lake. There is a lot of talk through Limpsbury and Coster that the capital should be moved and a new leader of Wavemates installed. Not as a noble of Signia, but as a noble of Wavemates. I'm sure that you can understand just how concerning that is for the nobles who were sent to govern the cities in Stantia province. Dominic sighed. Why do I feel like this is just going to become an extension of the Dagos Civil War? Most of the refugees we've taken in are old Wavemates loyalists who were living under Dagos rule and didn't want to switch to anyone but one of the old Wavemates loyalists. So, they're not truly loyal to Signia, no matter what loyalty I have. Telling them that I'm not intending to become a king isn't going to change their minds about wanting the good old days back. I'm glad that you understand the situation. No matter what you do, what you say, you and Princess Alexis are about to become the focal point of a revolution. What we don't know is how the king is going to react to it. If he turns the army on you and accuses you of treason for turning the people of Stantia province against the crown, there isn't any good outcome. At best, you could go on the run again. But I don't think that Axbridge would turn a blind eye a second time, so we would have to relocate you even further. And that would make things even worse for the people of Westover. So, while that's not quite as bad as the possibility that the Necromancer King is going to create an undead army out of the population of Dagos, or that he's going to try to relocate his people and start a second undead kingdom, it's definitely not good for us. Dominic sighed. Do you see any easy way out of the inevitable accusations? Elder Manif shrugged. There are a few. For one, you could start making allies among the senior nobles, as if you were pushing for Alexis to make a run for crown princess. That would make an enemy of everyone who supports Prince Claudius, as well as the crown prince himself, but it would greatly reduce the chances that you would be executed for treason. After all, it's not treason to want to be the next king consort when you're legitimately married to a princess. The less likely and more difficult route would be to invite the nobles that have been assigned to the 3 major cities of Stantia province here. Then you can convince them to make an alliance with you to strengthen the province as a whole. Call it a trade deal or anything else you want. But it would give you some stronger allies that would cause the king to hesitate in violent action. I'm not the best at this. However, you do have quite a few royals, including your wife and the second prince at the manor right now, and you can bring it all to their attention to start working on a plan before the news becomes public. I would say that you have about 12 hours before everyone knows. The Merchants Guild is doing their best to suppress the news so they can make a final day's worth of deliveries before the markets go crazy. Chapter 567. News Not Suppressed. The fact that the merchants were suppressing all the bad news in order to not have the chaos mess with their members' profits was a huge blessing to Dominic. If they hadn't, then the Duskblade sect wouldn't have managed to get the details in time to tell Dominic, who would have been caught unaware when the accusation started. Thank you for the warning, Elder. I should return to the manor and gather everyone for an emergency meeting before things get out of hand. Dominic decided. I will come with you. If everything goes sideways, the Duskblade sect will see that you at least make it out safely. The sect has already set protocols for this sort of event, though we didn't expect things to go in quite this direction. The original thought was that either Dagos or Axbridge might want to take this region into their fold. In those cases, we would send you back to Signia. However, we also planned for the eventuality where Signia lost the war and we were all put on the run again, against multiple hostile nations. Elder Manif explained. All right, this is about to get very interesting. It will be good to have you on my side while we find out what everyone else has to say. The elder opened a portal to the edge of the manor and smiled. We heard that you wanted a portal restriction, and we've set one for you. It's being maintained from within the manor compound by the trolls. We just told them it was to keep people from sneaking up on them. And you locked yourself out? It wouldn't be a good barrier if we built in loopholes to be exploited. The closest you can get is just outside of where the doors will be if the compound is locked down. Dominic sighed. We need to have someone go get my horse. Elder Manif laughed and opened another portal, back to the yard outside the tower. The mechanical warhorse was standing on the other side, and Dominic quickly called it through, so the portals could be closed and the staff could come grab the construct to bring it for cleaning and service. As they walked up the drive, Advisor Tryon appeared on the steps with an eager smile. Oh, just in time. There's been news from the intelligence agencies, and Prince Alex wants everyone together for a meeting. She explained. Great. We weren't fast enough. Advisor, good morning. I'm sure that you know we've got some questions for you as well. The aging techno witch winked at him and extended her arm for Elder Manif to escort her inside. Of course, young wavemates. Today's meetings are going to be all sorts of fun. The way you phrase that makes me think this will be anything but fun. Tryon giggled as she walked, and the maids escorted them all into the larger sitting room at the back of the manor, near the garden entrance. The royals, the advisors, the envoys, and their assistants were already all seated, waiting on the final arrivals. Princess Alexis was sitting next to her brother, and Dominic noticed that it wasn't just Alex today. Prince Russell was back, and he had at least one of his royal guards in the room. Your Grace, please take a seat, so we can get this meeting started. Prince Alex began in a stern tone. Tryon stopped at the close side of the table, next to the other Shersdonian representatives, which left Dominic a seat in a large armchair at the far side, separated from everyone else. Normally, that would feel like the head of the table, a position of honor for the host. Today, it felt more like a witness stand, where he was on trial with a room full of judgmental eyes turned his way. Prince Alex cleared his throat as Dominic took a seat. As the ranking royal, I will lead the meeting this morning if there are no objections. The first matter we need to address is the recent military action undertaken by Shersdonia within Dagos. Advisor, tell us this. Is your nation responsible for the siege of Albrols by the undead? Tryon shook her head. The undead around Albrols are not created nor controlled by us. They are a result of the disasters that have befallen Dagos as a nation. Our soldiers have been working to control the number of undead within Dagos to prevent the corruption from infecting the sea and land in a permanent way. Prince Fahad made a note, then began to speak. And what is your nation's motivation in eliminating the remaining Dagos nobles? Advisor Tryon was silent for a moment, then spoke carefully. I have no knowledge of the matter you are addressing. Our soldiers are only within Dagos on a humanitarian mission. Any casualties are the result of natural disasters or criminal activity. Without proper guidance from local law enforcement, the relief forces have chosen to enforce the Shersdonian criminal code in the regions receiving their assistance. Prince Alex rolled his eyes at the blatant lie, but didn't argue. Instead, he asked more questions. Are you aware that numerous foreign mage sects have been agitating against Signian rule of Stantia province? Tryon nodded. Indeed. Some of them are even from our nation, though none have been sent at the behest of the Necromancer King. I would also like to point out that the majority of them are either from Dagos' controlled territories or from Axbridge, while there are some from Signia itself that have expressed dissatisfaction with the current situation. That turned the second prince's attention away from her. Duke Dominic, are you aware of this situation? Dominic shook his head. I do not keep up with the political situation in the cities. I am aware that many mage sects have begun to travel as refugees in recent days, but not of any form of organization behind their movements. Prince Fahad smiled at him. So, You were not aware that they are calling for Stantia province to be returned to the Wavemates' noble bloodlines from before the Dago's occupation? That was a trick question for sure. Obviously, he was aware. They had discussed it many times before. But he wasn't provoking them. Chapter 568. Suspicious Actions. Dominic folded his hands in his lap. I am aware that there is a strong loyalist sentiment among the residents of Stantia province that would prefer that the old nobility was reinstated to their positions, or that a Signian noble family, with relations to the old Wavemates' noble families, was chosen to represent their territories. Tryon spoke in his defense. It is the understanding of the Shersdonian crown that such is already the case, and that as much as possible given the casualty rates, the newly appointed Signia nobles were ones with bloodlines related to the cities they have been chosen to govern. Prince Alex sighed. Fat lot of good it has done. The old noble family branches are gone, and the relatives we sent have mostly been insignia for generations. The cities are still only marginally under control, and the only thing keeping them from rebelling is the lack of options. Put that way, he had a point. Now that they'd seen that they could actually overthrow the nobles that were ruling them, many of the commoners in the cities were far more willing to do it a second time. They were just waiting for the chance and motivation to make another change. What they had was better than what they had removed, but it was still not everything that nostalgia and wishful thinking made them desire. Prince Fahad turned to advisor Tryon. If your people are only there for humanitarian purposes, surely you would not object to some additional assistance? The Axbridge army is willing to send both ground forces and light naval vessels to Dagos, starting with the Kainwan area and extending north toward the ocean. Tryon smiled softly, a caring expression that looked completely out of place in this serious setting. Then she shrugged. The more, the merrier. Kainwan is currently underwater, though the levels are receding at a decent rate now that the storms are ending. The Necromancer King has no issues with your forces taking on the rescue efforts, as there is no risk of excessive undead creation. The area appears to be free of lingering resentment, and terror at a natural disaster is not enough to trigger a mass-turning incident. And why would that be an issue for your people? You are known for the number of necromancers in your army. Surely, you see how this could be interpreted as an annexation plan. Dominic sighed, while Tryon rolled her eyes, but didn't speak. Duke Dominic, do you have some insight into this matter? Prince Alex asked. Indeed. You see, necromancers can raise a great number of undead if they put their mind to it and have the resources. But they cannot control a great number of undead. Turning millions of undead would only create a scourge that they would have to sacrifice their controlled undead to deal with, leaving them in a far worse position than where they started. Once summoned undead are out of a necromancer's control, it is not easy to bring them back under control. This was explained to me by a Shersdonian Lich Lord, who was quite concerned about the possibility of undead hordes rising from the floodwaters to overwhelm his relief force. Dominic explained. Prince Russell shook his head. This still sounds an awful lot like a plot to invade and overthrow Dagos, even should our rescue efforts manage to get the king out of Albrols. Prince Fahad nodded in agreement, while all the emissaries looked outraged. But Dominic noted that all of them had supported sending their own nation's troops into Dagos in various locations. In the edge of his vision, Elder Manif silently signed to Dominic. At least they're focused on the invasion aspect. That was true. There were other, much more concerning issues, from his personal perspective. So far, they had only touched on the possibility that there would be a revolt. But they were so focused on what was happening within Dagos right now that they hadn't considered the pure number of refugees headed this way after the storms. At least, not yet. The royals were all more concerned about the immediate threats, that the other groups present in this room might be making a play for the territories that Dagos was going to lose control over with their most recent casualties. But the way Dominic's luck had been going, he should have known that they would be reminded of him sooner or later. The first to get the alert were Alexis and her brothers. 20 inbound airships, arriving in Westover within the hour. Reports of nearly 20,000 refugees on path to reach the duchy within the next 48 hours. Dominic had the message signed to him by Elder Manif, as he did not yet have a magical communication device linked to anyone for real-time updates. But that was all that it took to get him back in the spotlight. Duke Dominic, Might you have an explanation for this phenomenon? All of these airships have bypassed a major city to request landing clearance in Westover. Prince Russell began. We are a trading port, as agreed by the emissaries here. It's only natural that they would request docking to deliver cargo and reload for foreign destinations.
Dominic began.
Yet none of them came bearing cargo to trade, only commoners from the edge of the storm-affected regions, or within Axbridge. The prince countered. Many people see Westover, with its open land options and commoner-friendly nobility, as a prime place to settle. We were also not seriously damaged by the storms, and that has led to some superstitious sorts believing that we are a lucky spot. As I understand it, there is a city within Chip that is the same way. Atlerid, I believe it's called. The prince scoffed. Sure, that city had gotten its fair share of refugees, but that's because it was east of where the storm made landfall. Most of the coastal cities had evacuated further inland, even if it meant going across the border into Carwick or Almond. We will be investigating this situation. The king believes that there is more to it, Prince Russell declared. Alexis sighed, but remained silent. As both the more junior royal and the Duchess of Westover, anything that she said would only cause more issues in this matter. She was also not clear of suspicion, though the king's concerns about her involvement were not as much about the chance of foreign loyalty. Chapter 569, Procedural Stalemate. Prince Fahad tapped the table and began to speak. As so many of these refugees are Axbridge citizens, we do have some concerns about the situation. They have already crossed our borders, so it would not be practical to turn them back and force them to return to their home nation immediately. However, we cannot condone such a massive loss of talent. The refugees seeking shelter within Westover are not just simple farmers. There are merchants, wealthy businessmen, even entire mage towers. Whole towns along the border have emptied in this exodus, and many thousands of the ones due to arrive by ground in the next few days are nomads from the desert. Their loyalties were never clear, and now that they are gathering in Westover, the Axbridge crown feels that they might be a threat both to the peace and to the trade agreements that we have come to for the region. He explained. The phrasing made it clear that this was not his personal opinion, but that of his father, the King of Axbridge. What do you suggest that we do about it? Dominic asked carefully. Security vetting. Everyone who enters should be assessed as a threat to the allied nations. That would also gather a huge amount of information about Westover's residents for the various royal families. Prince George Mitfield raised his voice a little as he spoke, asserting authority. I would like to suggest that as an impartial party in this matter, Mitfield will oversee the threat assessment. While we are party to the alliance, neither the refugees nor their destination are within our nation. Prince Alex shook his head. Though they might be refugees, they can now be considered subject to the Signian crown by their own free will. It wouldn't be appropriate to have foreigners interrogate them. He appeared to be reading from the stone tablet in his hands, and Dominic realized that this argument was mostly between the actual regents, using the representatives here as their proxies. There was a moment's silence, while the only sound was the frantic scribbling of the assistants, who took notes and made calculations based on the information that they were receiving. The pure number of refugees headed to Westover was overwhelming. Forget housing them, they would have to build an entire city, even after spreading all the farmers to appropriate properties. And that was a problem for everyone else. How did you calculate a proper threat assessment when an entire city appeared where a small village once stood? How did you calculate the military influence that they might wield when they had an inordinate number of sorcerers, mages, and non-human soldiers in said city? And how did that convert to political influence once they started using all that excess magic and military might to promote the new city's own interests? It was the right of a duke to promote his duchy. In fact, it was one of his duties as a landed nobleman. However, that did not mean that it wasn't anyone else's concern, or that they didn't wish to be as involved as possible. They were all preparing to argue their point when advisor Tryon spoke again. In the interest of international cooperation, why don't we delegate teams to take care of the vetting? A member from each nation's advisory group can be present when each of the refugees comes to register themselves. They can ask what questions they want, and everyone will have to come, as it's the only way to get a home in the region. She offered. Dominic nodded. That would be the best way, and it moved all the responsibility for vetting onto the emissaries and their teams, not onto him personally. That way, if someone slipped through, it would not directly come back to him. He would still have to go and explain the situation at least once a day, at least while everyone was still arriving. But after that, he could start arranging skilled workers to assist the infrastructure teams. If there really were some who were going to be an issue, they would either learn about it right away, or they would know to keep their affiliation to the Wavemates bloodline quiet. Dominic wasn't under any illusion that they would actually find the troublemakers by simply asking questions, unless it was a group of dangerous criminals that were turned in by other travelers. That wouldn't be enough to assure the princes that Westover was not going to go rogue and try to gather the commoners to gain control of the whole province. But it would delay the accusations. The senior royals all turned to each other, having other concerns about the plan. The emissaries and their teams were authorized to negotiate, but they were not security forces, and they were not authorized or trained to deal with a situation where they actually found someone who was in the region with nefarious purposes, or who was a wanted criminal. So, they were going to have to get the soldiers involved. That meant that there was going to have to be some negotiation between the nations about cooperation, military regulations, and procedures to accomplish the task without violating the Duke's noble right to accept citizens who were not indentured to or under sanction by another. And the biggest part was that in this situation, they couldn't just ask Dominic to have his people go along with the overseers, as there were still the concerns that all of these new arrivals were part of a grand uprising with goals of elevating his position or rebelling against the crown. It left them in a tight spot, and Tryon was living for it. Nobody knew what they were supposed to do in this situation, but if they didn't do anything before the first airships arrived, Dominic would have to go greet them, as it was his duty to keep the peace within his territory, and some of them would be cargo ships subject to search and duties on arrival. Dominic didn't actually charge any duties on goods being transferred, but it would still be a protocol violation that the other nations could use against whoever tried to stop it. Chapter 570. Time doesn't stop. The stalemate continued, with small tweaks being suggested every few minutes, but no concrete new plans being made. Then the news came in that there were airships landing in minutes, and time was up. Your Highnesses, I have duties to attend. If you would like to send an attendant with me to verify my genuine intentions, I welcome their presence. Dominic explained. Advisor Trine got to her feet. I will accompany you, on behalf of the nation of Shersdonia. We have security concerns about the whole region, so it's only reasonable. I won't interfere with your work. The other advisors and royals frowned at her enthusiasm. Did she not realize that they all still suspected that her people were infiltrating all of Dagos with the intention of overthrowing it? She was not making Dominic's situation any easier, implying that they were working together, or that she was at least aligned with his intentions. On the other hand, by getting up to go with him, she essentially forced the others to send someone with them. The royals watching their reports would lose their minds if the two prime troublemakers were left alone and unattended to meet with a collection of airships that could either be from the Axbridge border regions or northwestern Dagos. The origins couldn't be properly traced because of the storms. Alexis smiled as Prince Alex got to his feet, while Prince George sent a general from the Midfield Army to join them. I will grab Amy, and she can open a portal for us, so we don't have to look for a ride. Dominic explained. The second prince laughed. I can do that for you. It's not hard to get to the airship docks. That certainly reduced the number of excuses that Dominic had to bring his usual bodyguard with him. So, he whistled for Dave to come in and join them. Prince Alex wasn't going to argue with that. Dave had been with them the last time that they were attacked, and the trolls had saved their lives. If Dominic wanted to bring them everywhere, he wouldn't blame him one bit. It was just a bit inconvenient to get such a large troll through such an ordinary door. The airships were just beginning to land when they made it to the docks, and Dominic made a mental note that the first few all had Merchant Guild livery on them, but with the Axbridge and Skipple national symbols. That didn't mean that they were carrying passengers from those locations, but the airships themselves were not from Dagos. Greetings, Duke Westover, Your Highness, Madam. The merchant began. Welcome to Westover. What might you have for us today? Refugees, as you have likely guessed. You wouldn't have come in person if we were the materials supply vessel for the factories or the warehouses. We started out near the Cliftonby River, which was heavily damaged during the storm. For some reason, the storms appeared to be more vicious than normal near anywhere with a mage tower, and they requested that we evacuate the civilians from the village near the border. The mage tower didn't leave with you? Dominic asked. No, Your Grace. They informed us that they would hold the tower as long as possible, and then move inland using their portal array if the situation became untenable. They had already received nearly a meter of rain by the time that we arrived to evacuate, and we only narrowly missed being forced to leave without the residents as the winds picked up. We joined one of the convoys, and now we're here. It's been slow going, as many of the airships are damaged and all are overloaded. But my duty has been done. All right. We have been asked to do some interviews with the new arrivals beyond the basics. There is some concern that there might be military deserters and assassins among the refugees. Well, wouldn't that be quite the thing?
All right.
You'll find this group is pretty boring, but we passed over some interesting ones earlier today. You can tell me about that as well. If you have concerns, it's best I hear it in advance. It's not like that, Your Grace. Just an odd grouping, you might say. From the air, it looked like there was an entire mage tower traveling with 1,000 assorted trolls coming this way. They're following the river, so they came from further west, but they're almost here. Prince Alex sighed. That was one of the things that the king was most concerned about. The trolls were drawn to the Dragon Royals, and an army of thousands of them equipped with Magitech gear would be powerful enough to take most cities. What could you even do against an enemy that didn't stop when you shot it? Send over your people, and I will start sorting them. We've got a number of barons currently moving into new territories and looking for loyal subjects. They will have knights moving in to assist them soon, but we're in the middle of a debutante event, and nobody wanted to miss it for the sake of moving. The merchant nodded understandingly. It's better to get there for the first time with your new wife and build from nothing. I didn't even pick my new house. I just made approving noises while my wife did, and then I paid for it. Now that was a man who knew how to avoid conflict. The airships continued to land, and the message was relayed to the other merchants so that they all knew what the situation was. None of the people coming out of the airships seemed to be concerned about the situation, but a few of the merchants did have more questions. For example, I don't suppose that you know about that rigid airship that's been working the area, do you? It passed us twice already this week. That thing is insanely fast. We're holding 20 kilometers an hour on a good day, without too bad of a headwind, but it's moving close to 100. Crossing over 1,000 kilometers from Kynwyn to Westover, we could have used that sort of speed, and most of us came from at least that much further into Axbridge. Dominic made a grand gesture. You've come to the right place. That, my friends, is a product of the Westover Airship Works. It has just passed final testing and has been sold to the Merchants Guild. We will have more of them up for sale soon, and as you have observed, the sustained steam-powered transit speed with 50 tons of cargo is over 100 kilometers an hour. With extra magical assistance, it can go much heavier and a little faster.